Hi, pumpkin pies, or for anybody who plays the famous drinking game, which is to do with trying to guess what kind of name I'm going to give you guys at the beginning of a video. I understand it's becoming increasingly popular now. Hello, sweet peas, hello, Pop Tarts, hello, custard creams, hello, jelly babies. Um, hello, what else do I say? My little treasures, my little cherubs, my old china plates, my little apple pies. Um, I can't remember what I even said at the beginning of this one. Darlings, sweethearts, guys and dolls. There's a hell of a lot. And this is not exclusive to my video output, by the way. All of my friends have little pet names. Everybody gets a little pet name. Some of them actually have specific pet names, like pet names that are specific to them. I have one friend who's called Peaches and Cream because her skin is just perfect. It's like a baby's bum, as we say in England. Very soft, very buttery. So she always gets called Peaches and Cream. Treacle is another very popular one. And my boyfriend is Badger, quite often Badger or Panda, my little panda. So yeah, I don't know where the whole nickname thing originated. I think I've been doing it since I was a teenager, and I think originally it was probably an affectation. It was probably something I decided to do to be a little bit different to the norm, because that was the basis of most of my decisions when I was 14 years old, which is why I have a hole here and a hole here and a hell of a lot of very goth looking tops that now really no longer have a place in my wardrobe. But yeah, I do love a good pet name, and it's something that's going to be with me now, I think, until death. I can't really help it. I do sometimes give strangers pet names, and an ex-boyfriend once said to me, you know, you shouldn't do that. Like if somebody holds the door for you, you shouldn't say thanks Angel or thanks Cupcake, because people might think that's a little bit forward or a little bit rude. And I took his point. I think most people like it. But then, you know, a lot of women these days don't really like a man saying, all right, darling, or thanks, sweetheart, or whatever. So it's kind of not really very fair for me to go around doing it to guys if, you know, if I would maybe sometimes feel a little bit weird about them doing it to me. Not that I always do, it depends upon the context, of course. If they're just trying to be polite and calling a woman sweetheart is very much of their kind of day and place and time in the world, then that's fine. But sometimes if, you know, if a guy's trying to be rude or trying to talk down to a woman and he uses the term sweetheart, it really does rub us up the wrong way. So it's about context for me, really, but I appreciate not everybody enjoys nicknames. And some people may find it slightly immature, but it's just me. It's how I roll. So, the reason that I went into my 3-minute long explanation of pet names and stuff is really because I think this video is going to have quite a serious flavour to it, and I just wanted to kind of shake it out, because I've tried filming this one a couple of times already now, and I feel that it kind of comes over a little bit clinical and sterile because of the things that I'm talking about and trying to explain. And I really just didn't enjoy the results of those videos, so I didn't upload them. I want to kind of try and keep things comfortable and chatty like I do with my other videos, but the way that I'm going to try and explain things does kind of get a bit serious and a bit sterile, so I apologise if that's not your particular flavour. But what I'm going to discuss really is my practice of spiritual counselling and what I do with tarot. And I'm going to try and stick to what's necessary to explain. So I'll start by saying that I qualified as a spiritual counsellor last April, and there are many different ways that you can qualify to do holistic counselling or counselling which is more alternative. You don't necessarily have to become a spiritual counsellor or do it through the same body or organisation that I did it, but there are various different ways that you can get into this kind of thing, which actually celebrates and appreciates the alternative ways of counselling and healing and helping with emotional development and stuff of that nature. You do need to prove that you have a very strong grasp of other kinds of counselling technique and other kinds of psychological theories. As well as already having a background in some form of alternative therapy, whichever one you favour. That was how I did it. But there are various different ways of getting into it if you did want to get a qualification. I know some people have asked me, but there are absolutely hundreds online that you can take, and some of them are highly reputable. And some are kind of like full-on courses. I know Flora does a very kind of long and drawn-out course on how to become a certified ethical intuitive, which quite a few people on YouTube that I admire have taken and are now certified ethical intuitives. So that's something that I would consider as well if your budget is a bit bigger. I know that Flora Sage Therapies Institute is very respected now, and she's kind of gone on and done a lot of cool stuff in that way. So I'm certainly looking at picking up some other qualifications too. I do have a qualification in bereavement counselling specifically, which is something that I did with an ex-place of employment where I worked for quite a long time, where it was very important to look into bereavement counselling and how to deal with people who were grieving. And I also have some expertise and some qualifications in addiction, not necessarily in counselling, but in how to talk to people with addictions, how to assess their area of need in kind of traditional medicine and psychotherapy, so that we can kind of direct them to the appropriate place. So it's always been something that I've been interested in on and off through my life. What does it mean to be a spiritual counsellor, or in another way, what does it mean to go to a spiritual counsellor? What kind of help would you get from a spiritual counsellor? That's really the first thing that I wish to explain, because the title spiritual counsellor probably can get a little bit confusing and convoluted. So I would always say that one of the best ways to explain it is that a spiritual counsellor takes the soul as the starting point rather than the mind. And I've seen a fellow spiritual counsellor online who wrote a very in-depth article about this, and that was how she actually described the difference, that we take the soul as the starting point rather than the mind. And I quite like that. Another thing that is markedly different about a spiritual counsellor is that a spiritual counsellor acts and operates very much like a normal counsellor, with one key difference, potentially one key difference, and that is that the spirituality of the client, the spiritual outlook and the spiritual beliefs and the spiritual practices of the client are not ignored and are actually not pushed out of the therapeutic process. They are actually encouraged, they are actually brought actively into the therapeutic process. And spiritual counsellors believe that those with a strong spiritual nature can actually use that spiritual nature to help them get through whatever it is that they're going through. And there's also a big belief with this kind of counselling that transpersonal experience is very important for people who are going through difficulties, experiencing shifts, not sure which direction to take their life in, are experiencing depression, that kind of thing. I have a huge belief in the value of transpersonal therapy, which is therapy which attempts to help extend the client and expand the client beyond their ego self, beyond their thoughts of ego and beyond their thoughts of the material and beyond their thoughts of what's going on in their specific life, and actually help them to form a connection, to form a bond with the universe, with divinity, with source, with all of that good stuff. Transpersonal experience can be extremely nourishing and nurturing, and it can give a client a lot of perspective. So it's also a big part of what I do, is to actually encourage transpersonal experience. I kind of approach a client's issues from what I would consider to be somewhat of a shamanic focus point. So, you know, if you went to a shaman and you were having problems with your life, you were having difficulties making decisions, maybe you were grieving, maybe you were heartbroken, a shaman would be very interested in knowing when was the last time you danced, when was the last time you felt this sense of gay abandon, when was the last time you sat outside in the rain, when was the last time you felt really connected, switched on, plugged in to the universe and felt one with its energy and felt like you weren't devoid from its energy in any way. That would be important for a shaman, and it would also be important for somebody who offers alternative medicine, complementary medicine, medicine which actually doesn't align itself with the traditional focus, which is very biomedical. That kind of question is important because the soul is taken into consideration, and emotional well-being based on one's connection to the all is taken into consideration. Excuse me, and I can tell you as somebody that's had long-standing chronic pain that it absolutely bloody should be taken into consideration, and it is a huge reason, I think, that so many people are not rubbing along quite so well with traditional medicine in one way or another. We call it traditional medicine, but shouldn't the alternative medicine, the stuff from way back when, that should be called traditional, right? I don't know why we call modern Western medicine traditional. It's strange. But anyway, modern Western medicine, I think that's the reason that a lot of us have had our problems with it and not been able to stick with it, and have actually gone and tried to find these complementary practitioners, because approaching the body from a purely biomedical perspective is quite naive and quite wrong. And it's something that I've realised tenfold since I've been trying to deal with my own issues and actually kind of remove myself from the doctor's office a little and take the power back into my own hands. So, you know, it's a very valid question that anybody that was coming from a spiritual counselling perspective in any sense would ask a client. Myself as a spiritual counsellor, I'm also very good at helping with things like spiritual crises, spiritual identity issues, shifting from one set of beliefs and practices to another, trying to work out what kind of ritual practice works for the individual, helping an individual to hone and create a spiritual practice which is meaningful for them, kind of helping to dissolve the guilt that comes with practicing something alternative in spirituality, helping somebody to understand where their identity actually lies on the spiritual spectrum and how to be comfortable with that and accepting of that. So, you know, spirituality is something that I certainly specialise in, And as a dedicant and somebody with a true spiritual path myself that I've been on for years, is something that I can definitely advise in. But I think a lot of people read that I'm a spiritual counsellor and assume that the only thing I counsel in is spirituality, or at least that's kind of what I would think would be the worry for me, because that's what I would think if I read that without knowing exactly what was involved with it. And as a spiritual counsellor, I actually help with all aspects of life, relationships, finances, starting a business, grieving, heartbreak, all kinds of things like that. But I approach it from a spiritual perspective, meaning I will actually ask you to integrate your spiritual beliefs and your sense of emotional intelligence and your personal story, your personal history into what I'm doing, what we're doing together. So, I do favour transpersonal experience, and I practice what's called psychosynthesis. Do you know what? I always say that fine off camera, but as soon as I do a video, I can never pronounce it properly, which drives me crackers. Psychosynthesis, there we go. It's a bit of a tongue twister. Psychosynthesis actually combines three different types of therapy, or three different attitudes and approaches to therapy. So first of all, we have like your dynamic therapy, where you're actually looking into the past, you're trying to understand what role conditioning plays in the life of the client, trying to work out which experiences in their childhood, their formative years, their earlier adulthood have actually had a lasting effect and have brought them to how they are now. So we are looking at the past, we are exploring the past, we are understanding that the past has its part to play in what is going on in the present. I think that's incredibly important, and it's something that certain aspects of psychology, like behaviourism, for example, will just point blank refuse to take into account because it's not considered to be important. So this is by no means, delving into the past is by no means something that the entirety of the psychotherapeutic community actually adopts. There are certain aspects of psychology, certain theories and concepts that are out there which completely reject the importance of diving into the past. I'm not one of those people, so that is something that I will often do with a client. The second part of psychosynthesis relates to the present and relates to things like cognitive behavioural therapy, pragmatic techniques in the here and now to help to shape behaviour and to help to limit any damaging kind of influences that are coming into the client's life by doing things which are hands-on, proactive, and that are to do with almost training the brain and shifting the neural pathways in a very kind of rational and logical way, to improve life as it is now. So cognitive behavioural therapy and also some aspects of life coaching, they're also things that I put into my practice. The third part of the triad in psychosynthesis is the transpersonal aspect, and that is something that I've never lost touch with and that I have always considered to be incredibly important, not least because I spent a very long time in traditional therapeutic relationships while I was going through my mental health breakdown and dealing with self-harm and all that other kind of stuff. And what I realised after going through a lot of that was that transpersonal experience is vital and very often omitted as a cause for concern in traditional therapy. And that always really bothered me. So as I was growing up and I was realising that I was helping people, in my mid-20s is when I really started to realise it for real, that I was helping people with tarot and I was helping people to actually direct their energy where it needs to be directed, get clear on their intuition, heal their emotional wounds. I realised that I was doing things in a very different way than the way that I was taught in traditional therapy and in traditional counselling settings. I was taking the soul into account, I was taking the transpersonal into account, and I did feel that that kind of thing was often the missing link for a lot of people who had been through traditional therapy and said that it did fail them. So it's something really important to me, the transpersonal aspect. So that's what psychosynthesis is really all about. It's about combining those three different focal points together to create something that fits. And, what I would say I do with clients is that I actually just tailor make advice to their specific needs. So I wrote a blog post last night which actually kind of went into this in a sense. Everything that I advise and everything that I teach and everything I talk about with my own personal journey on this channel and on the blog and on my Facebook page as well, where I often do write long reams of stuff about self-development and spiritual evolution and such. all of those things I wish to give, and I wish to give for free, and I wish to give as much as possible. I feel like there's almost so much inside of me, so many dots that I've connected over the years of being in therapy and having my own very personal difficulties with emotions and so on. I feel that I want to give all of that out, and a lot of that will hit where it's supposed to hit for a lot of people. I'll put a video out, and it's not for anyone in particular, it's for everybody who needs that information and advice, and it will often hit in the right place. The only difference with becoming a client is that with becoming a client, you are getting tailored one-on-one guidance, which is developed according to your very specific needs, and the action plan and the focus areas and how we go on from there will be purely relating to you. So that's the only difference. I would say that there is absolutely nothing that I hold back for paying clients only in terms of what I know. In terms of what I know and what I've acquired and what I've read and what I've experienced, what I've personally been through, all of that stuff is stuff that I will continue to put out. And there are literally hundreds more videos in the pipeline. Oh, time, you sneaky little devil. But you know, there's so many more ideas, so much that I want to put out into the world, and I will always do that for nothing, and it will always be because I've been in some of these situations myself, and I desire to help other people to kind of clear the pathway and clear the thicket. And I love talking about it because I've gotten so much from it. So I speak very largely from my own personal experience, and you know, the back catalogue of stuff that I have personally read about psychology and personal development has been part of what I have selected for my own personal journey forwards. I have carved out my path, and that's what I want to encourage other people to do. So I want to throw as much information into the mix as possible, things that I've tried, things that other people do that, you know, they've recommended and stuff like that. I want to mishmash it. I want it to be a pick and mix, and for people to have as much to go forward with as they possibly can. Clients will get my mind just as fully as anybody who doesn't ever pay for my services does, but in that instance it will be tailor-made. It will be something that we discuss together. It will be something that we go through that is just about me, you, and the journey forward. So that's really the only difference. But those are a few details about what I do in my spiritual counselling practice. The fact that I do actually guide people through all manner of situations in life, but it's really about the style, and it's really about what I incorporate that other forms of more traditional counselling and therapy tend to omit. So that was the first thing that I wanted to say. The thing with tarot is that tarot is a tool for me to actually utilise and harness and give out my spiritual counselling knowledge. Tarot never dictates the terms for me. I use tarot because I think it's such a perfect illustration of the whole of human experience, and I think that it holds so many lessons. And there are so many different card combinations and so many different pieces of guidance and nuggets of wisdom that come up, that, you know, it is a perfect tool, and it does rub along really nicely with what I do with spiritual counselling. But it is a vehicle really to inspire me on the correct way to guide and advocate and facilitate for a client. It's never the whole animal. So I trust very much in its energies and in what it has to say, and I trust that it will guide me to the correct areas of focus, and it does. But it's something that I work with. It's something where I would say that I am never just a tarot reader. When people ask me what I do with my online content and what I want to continue to do going forward with my life, I never say, oh, I'm a tarot reader, because I don't let tarot dictate the terms in that way. Now, there's nothing wrong with the title tarot reader. Let me get that very clear. I know a lot of people these days who are reading tarot online like to select different titles. Some people like to go in for the life coach vibe and purchase an online course to help them to qualify as a life coach, and then they can be a tarot life coach. There's tarot therapy. A lot of people are calling themselves tarot consultants, which I actually quite favour. It's got that business vibe to it. So there are all of these different ways of putting your message forward and deciding what works for you as a title, which actually encapsulates what you do with tarot. And if you simply favour the term tarot reader, that's fine. But what I always think about that is that it makes it sound as though I am kind of merely the conduit, or how can I put this? It makes it sound as though tarot is the hand upon the machine, and I'm just kind of like the person that puts it all together. And I'm skilled at interpreting tarot, and I'm skilled at interpreting it according to somebody's specific needs. But I am also somebody who is coming into every single reading they do, every single consultation they do, with a desire to operate in a counselling way. And that means that I will always bring my own knowledge and my own suggestions and my own guiding force to the table as well. Another thing I would say is very important is that I believe that the client should have complete empowerment. I believe that, I have believed that since day one of reading for other people when I was very young, when I was in my teens. I really feel that we're coming into an age now with tarot where we're more and more beginning to embrace it as a tool for empowerment, as a tool for putting power into the hands of the client themselves. And this is something that's really important for me, and it's something that I would hope to impart to my clients and give to my clients, is that, tarot is the sat nav but they decide upon the direction, or tarot is, the keys to the car but they actually have to drive where they want to go, that kind of thing. I think Teresa Reed, the tarot lady, uses something like, what is her tagline? It's something like, tarot tells you a story but you write the ending. See, I love that kind of thing because it's directly, even as soon as you click on her website, it is directly letting you know, I put power into your hands, you decide what you do with it. I help you to clear the pathways, I help you to expand your horizons and explore your choices, and then you move on from that point. And I really love that. And I think it's something that a lot of tarot readers and tarot enthusiasts who are offering readings these days are so clear on. And I think that is part of what the deal is with restoring the spiritual dignity of tarot. I won an award at the beginning of this year, and what I won the award for was partly for restoring the spiritual dignity of tarot. That was what the Tarot Association told me that I had won the award for. And this was a huge privilege because actually I never would have thought of using that particular word combination, but it's perfect. It's perfect to describe and explain what I have always been trying to do with the tool and what I always will do with the tool. Because those 78 cards are a lot deeper and a lot more sacred and a lot more poignant than call this premium rate psychic hotline. I've always believed that, and to be recognised for contributing to restoring the spiritual dignity of tarot was so poignant for me and so meaningful. And I think that's what a lot of tarot readers are doing at the moment. It's focusing on placing empowerment into the hands of the client. It's focusing on not directing from above and not being, not kind of instructing subjectively, but guiding objectively, being an ally for that client, going with the client on their journey and, easing them into expanding their consciousness and exploring their choices, rather than this whole kind of cross my palm with silver and I'll tell you who you're going to marry and I'll tell you should stay away from that person and you should quit your job or whatever. Shouldn't come into it. I've never written you should do this in a tarot reading, I don't think, ever, because it's just not the correct energy that I want to send out. I want to send out an energy of, you are holding the reins, let's explore where you can go, let's explore what you can do. That's very important to me, and that's something that I wanted to mention as well. When I came out of my own journey, very long and winding journey with traditional therapy, and I started to realise upon my own kind of healing, emotional healing, which I feel came largely from self. I don't think there's anything that I learned in traditional therapy with a counsellor sat opposite me that has really sat with me. Maybe one thing, I can think of one thing that a counsellor said to me. It was quite soon after I tried to take my own life at the age of 17. And she said this to me and it really stuck with me. But most counselling and most therapy that I've been through didn't do anything of the sort. It maybe made me feel a bit of stability because I felt that I was being recognised by the system as somebody who did need help, and therefore I was getting the appropriate help. So it probably made me feel a little bit more emotionally stable, and it probably took my risk of suicide and self-neglect from very, very high to kind of medium, kind of predictable, a little bit less kind of all over the place, because I was being monitored, I was getting regular help. But really, a counselling setting is really often like talking and not really getting anything back. A very skilled counsellor in a traditional counselling setting will know what kind of questions to ask you to get you thinking in a new way, and that's part of what cognitive behavioural therapy is all about. So that's the kind of thing that a counsellor can be more skilled or less skilled at. But they're never really allowed to input any kind of inspiration to you, any kind of motivation to you. And also they're not really encouraged or allowed or permitted to formulate a relationship with you where you feel like they are advocating you and they are spurring you on and they are facilitating your journey forward. It can be very cold, very distant, very clinical, very sterile in the counselling environment when it is more traditional, and it doesn't have these extra alternative modalities and this spiritual focus to it. When it's traditional counselling, it can get like that. And I think that is why I have had so many clients telling me that in one way or another, they felt that traditional therapy failed them. And that is why they have ended up going to some kind of an alternative counsellor, a counsellor who uses tarot, a counsellor who uses different kinds of modalities and has a different attitude to what counselling should really be all about, in essence. I think that's why that happened for a lot of people, is because, you know, I was talking to an amazing woman last night who I'm doing some work with, and she was telling me that she realised quite soon after entering the world of traditional counselling and sitting down in front of this counsellor, she realised after a few sessions of doing that if the idea was for her to just talk to herself about her issues and get no answers back, she could do that while she was driving around in the car. And I laughed and I thought, I think that is so true for so many people who've been through a traditional counselling experience, is that they talk and they really often don't get anything back. They don't get any input. And the whole point of not getting any input in a traditional counselling setting is that the counsellor is not supposed to influence you one way or another. The counsellor is what one would call traditionally a listening helper. And as such, they are supposed to hold some space for you and allow you to process your emotions, but they're not supposed to actually impart any of their own guidance or knowledge or suggestions, that kind of thing. And I can understand that, but I feel that there is a middle way of doing it where you can actually be an ally for your client, and you can actually be on board with them. You can journey with them for that part of their life without overtly influencing them, without risking kind of taking over their life or ruling their choices. I think sometimes people that go to counselling need to be inspired. They need to be made more aware of the choices that are out there for them. They need to enjoy the nurturing that comes with symbolism, like the symbolism I use in tarot. That is inspiring for a client. That is exciting. That shakes things up. It makes them think about things in a new way. It makes them feel more daring. It makes them feel more explorative. It makes them feel like they can put their foot out of their comfort zone a little bit and look around and see what's going on the perimeter of it. Perimeter of it. Oh, the English language. It's a mongrel language. It was banned by the Vatican for a really long time, you know. It's a rock and roll language. Pope didn't want anyone speaking English. Oh, no. So, yeah, guerrilla language. Anyway, moving on. So when I realised that I was becoming a guide of one kind or another, and people were returning to me for these readings, and people in my life were needing readings, and they were really, really taking some stock, putting some stock in what the cards were saying and in how I was personally interpreting them, I wrote down a few words that kind of gave me a sense of the kind of counsellor slash guide slash mentor that I would like to grow up to be. And I wrote these words quite a long time ago, but a few of them that I've got here are ally, advocate, facilitator, listener, fellow traveller, equality, and giver of inspiration. Now, one of the main ones that I still use even to this day is fellow traveller. And the reason for this is that I feel that another problem with a lot of traditional therapy settings is that there's a sense of hierarchy. And this is what a lot of people that follow transpersonal therapy techniques are really trying to get rid of. In transpersonal therapy, there's a lot of focus being placed, especially at the moment, on this notion that we need to break down the sense of hierarchy and the sense of power play and the sense of control in the therapeutic relationship. We need to be equal with the client. Okay, the client is not some dumb stupid sheep that doesn't know their arse from their elbow, and we are not some holier than thou, mightier than everything. I have the key and all you have to do is ask for it and maybe I'll give it to you and you can unlock the door. It's not like that. We're equals. We're both travellers, and at this point in time with me and the client, whoever that might be, I am the one that is almost kind of holding the torch and saying, okay, we've got this door, you don't want to be here anymore, so how can we facilitate you getting here? There's no sense of hierarchy or power play in it whatsoever. And I think that's something that's so important. So fellow traveller for me was just a way of being very egalitarian, and a way also of realising that every single client that I would ever have, if I actually started to do this and live my dream and get the qualification and actually own my desire to help people in a spiritual counselling context, it was my decision that every client that I had would teach me something in some way too. And that has absolutely happened. It is one of the most accurate predictions I've ever made. Every single client that I have been privileged enough to step onto their journey with at one point or another and hold that torch for them has taught me something about myself. And a lot of the readings that I've done in the past have contributed overtly to being able to get better and better at doing readings for others. And every single client is individual, and every single client is taken on an individual basis with their issues. But I have often come across issues that have come up in a client's life a few months after similar issues have come up in another client's life. And when that initial client came to me, I might have not known so much about that issue, or I might have wondered how to connect the dots using the modalities that I use in spiritual counselling. So I will have read, I will have researched, I will have looked at what's out there in studies and statistics. I will have tried to connect the dots myself. And so I've learned all of that stuff with that initial client. And when the next client comes along, I've got more tools in the toolkit. I've got more things I can throw at it. I've got more suggestions to make, more focus areas that could be potent and poignant and meaningful. So really, my clients spur me on to learn more, to read more. And I read mountains of stuff every day about self-development and life coaching and CBT. And I read about mythopoetic structure for helping with counselling techniques. I read about archetypes. I read about the inner child. I read articles about how to connect with creativity, how to bring it forward. Self-love. I sit there and read Stephanie Dowrick even now. I mean, God, I read her years ago, and her messages have gone through me. But I feel now that I want to interpret those messages in my own way. I want to think about how they've connected with my personal history and how I can use all of these techniques in a very tailored and individual way for my clients. So my clients are the reason that I constantly better myself in my practice with tarot and with spiritual counselling as well. So, and also they inspire me. They're brave, they're courageous, they're psyche diving, they're touching the great tap root. And that to me is incredibly potent. That is a potent force in my life. So yes, they have always taught me something, and I always hope to teach them something. And this is what I mean by equality, fellow traveller. I'm a fellow traveller, and there's no kind of teaching from above. And that's something that's very important for me in my practice. Another thing I wanted to say about people who feel kind of failed by traditional counselling or the traditional therapeutic setting, aside from the fact that they have said sometimes it feels kind of stale and sterile and as though they're actually talking to themselves, whereas they kind of feel like they want this ally, they want this advocate, and they feel almost as though the counsellor is kind of not wanting that because they see it as friendship, which is actually other to the therapeutic process. So they kind of distance themselves from that completely. It's not considered to be part of the process. But a lot of people who go to a tarot reader or a spiritual counsellor or a Reiki healer or, whatever the case may be, a lot of people who go to those who practice these alternative modalities, they go there because they want somebody that they feel is on board with them, that's inspired by their journey, that actually wants to think about, okay, what can we do? How many possibilities can I give you? How many ways can I give you to get deeper and dig underneath? With counselling, you often don't feel like you get that with traditional counselling. It's a very sterile environment a lot of the time, and you don't feel that you're getting anything back aside from kind of an echo of the words that you've just said. And sometimes you need a little more than that. But I think the other reason that some people have been put off or failed by traditional counselling is because it sometimes feels quite accusatory in nature. A big part of counselling somebody is to help them to take ownership and accountability for what they're doing with their life, for the actions that they're taking, for the beliefs that they're fostering, for the negative cycles that they're allowing to continue. And taking accountability and taking ownership is quite tough, and speaking to somebody about taking accountability can sometimes be tough. But there are ways and means of doing it lovingly. Nobody actually volunteers to go into the counselling setting and talk to somebody, talk to a professional, or talk to somebody that can kind of aid them in a healing capacity. Nobody volunteers for that if they don't want to take accountability. Sometimes you'll come across people, I never have, but in traditional counselling, I feel there can kind of be these pockets of people who want to use a counsellor to actually just offload, and they will offload things like what everybody else has done, how much blame they place on everybody else, why they're in the situation they're in terms of what's gone wrong, what's been unfortunate, what they haven't had in life, etc. And it can be difficult maybe then for the traditional counsellor to spur them on into thinking about what they can do proactively, moving out of victimhood, taking ownership of what comes next in life. And that's part of the process. But I think everybody who's come to me has, every single client that I've ever spoken to and kind of aided on their journey, none of them have been afraid of wanting to take accountability, or none of them have been adverse to the idea, but they don't know how. they kind of don't know where to find that groove in the wood. And that's what I'm there for. I'm the facilitator, I'm the ally. I want to inspire, I want to motivate, I want to work alongside a client to think about how we can do this and how I can give them that foothold into the next part of building after they leave me. I want them to have everything that I've given them and more. That's why I offer focus areas, that's why I offer key questions, I offer advice for the long term and exercises and journaling techniques that they can be getting on with in the longer term, so that they are flourishing and thriving long after they've had the reading. The reading is never the end, the reading is the beginning. And it's what they do going on from there. So it's really about strengthening them and giving them that necessary armor that they need to go out and fight that battle, whatever that battle is. So, I just think that taking accountability can be a very hard road, but I don't think that anybody needs to be spoken to in an accusatory manner as though they are not trying to take accountability, or, as though that is other to their intention. It's just sometimes very difficult to, when you've been going through cyclical processes that are really not serving you and really causing you a lot of pain, you get stuck there. You can't really envision yourself out of it. You can't imagine kind of going somewhere else, or you have this vague idea of what it will feel like and what it will taste and smell like, but you don't know how to get from here to there. And that is a massive part of what I do, and that's what I wanted to offer to my tribe and to my client base, is something that I felt that I didn't get when I was in the traditional counselling setting, and something that I know that a great many other people don't experience in the traditional counselling setting either, is that sense of igniting the spark within you, being that facilitator, being that ally, that fellow traveller, somebody that you feel is actually there for you, who actually gives a shit whether or not you succeed. And a lot of the times people just don't experience that in traditional counselling. And I think that when you find those figures in the more mainstream therapeutic world, psychotherapeutic world, who do offer that, they are gems, they are diamonds in the rough, and they are so important. And as I said, I had one of those gems when I came out of hospital after trying to end my own life, and she did say some things to me that were very poignant. But I think the point was that she said those things to me. A lot of counsellors these days don't really say anything. They hang back, and they might be very good at holding space in terms of allowing you to feel secure to talk about what you want to talk about. But then if you're stuck, if you are not inspired on where to start, if you are feeling like there is a void in some sense and you can't get a handle on how to bridge that void, then the counsellor should speak. The counsellor should ask the questions that need answering. The counsellor should give you focus areas to work on, and they should be tailored to your very specific needs. If you get that in your therapeutic situation, that is what really matters, is that you feel that that person is with you for your journey, not as a friend in a professional sense, but as an ally, as a facilitator. Not somebody that's going to allow you to BS, not somebody that's going to allow you to continue to self-sabotage, as friends so often do because they find it difficult to be objective. That's why I say, the term friend doesn't necessarily come into it, but the term ally, the term facilitator, you should feel you're getting that. And that's what I try and give with my practice with tarot. And I see so many great readers. Like I still get readings now when I have a little bit of a struggle with something, when I know that I myself can't be objective. There are a few tarot readers that I go to, and I go to them for different reasons. And, they give me that advice, that instruction, that inspiration to take my own empowerment into my own hands and really harness my own strengths and, help myself to see my way through and decide what comes next. And that is so important. And, that's why I do a lot of free lessons on tarot as well, because I feel like tarot can be used for self-counselling, and I really believe in the value of self-counselling. I think it's ever so valuable, and if I can teach people to use the cards on their own time and counsel themselves too, then I think that's a magical kind of wondrous thing to put out into the world, and I love doing that. And I just want to take this moment as well to thank my fellow tarot readers, my fellow tarot enthusiasts, my fellow tarot students, my fellow tarot nerds, tarot business owners. Thank you so much for being on this ride with me, because if it wasn't for the power of the internet, I would be just like the strange little village tarot reader, and I probably wouldn't have anyone to play with and anyone to talk to. And it's been absolutely amazing being a part of this community. And this video was really just to sum up how I link my counselling practice with my tarot practice, and I hope I've actually managed to do that in a way that kind of explains how the two fit together and how they're kind of married together. It's a marriage of thunder. It's a beautiful thing. But I would say that without my spiritual counselling background, and without kind of putting my personal experiences and the study that I've done and the modalities that I favour, and getting very clear on which modalities I favour from a counselling perspective, tarot would just be a bunch of cards. So I really feel that. And I really feel that without tarot, my practice would be good, but it wouldn't be so good. It wouldn't be amazing. It wouldn't have that extra spark. So they really are married, and it really is a marriage of thunder, and long may it continue. Much love, guys. Blessed be.